me start by introducing a topic that I have been deeply engaged with recently. It's closely related to my research on Orientalism, particularly the works of Edward Said. Now, Edward Said's work primarily explores a later form of Orientalism, distinct from the kind we associate with the Middle Ages, which emerged to understand the Muslim conquest. To put it simple, his focus on a more recent version, and while Said offers valuable insights, there are some aspects he overlooked when examining the work of various scholars. In this discussion, my focus will be on highlighting the elements related to Napoleon's conquest of Egypt and the arguments Said makes in relation to that. In exploring Said's book, we uncover several key points regarding Napoleon's influence. After his conquest of Egypt, many Western scholars followed, surrounding and dominating the literary tradition, and to Said, this period was crucial in constructing the fictional Orient. Although the creation of this fictional Orient began earlier, and it was Napoleon's conquest that truly made it possible to conquer the material world, as well as the ideal world or imagination, if you will. Said argues that this imaginative documentation was a powerful tool in shaping how the East was perceived and represented by the West. Setting aside the other debates about figures like de Sacy, Flaubert, and other great scholars, I want to focus specifically on the influence of Constantine Volney on Napoleon. While Volney is a crucial figure in Oriental studies, he was a French scholar whose writings, according to Said, had significant impact on Napoleon's expedition into Egypt, and it was based on Volney's work that Napoleon formed most of his decisions, which ultimately altered the history of the Orient forever. Reading Said, it became clear that Volney played a significant role in shaping the events in Egypt. It was Volney's imagination that ultimately influenced the Napoleonic expedition. What's important to note is that Volney had a personal connection with Napoleon, and his works accompanied Napoleon on his visit to Egypt. Yet the extent to which Napoleon's own understanding of the Orient influenced these events is a question that Said never fully addressed. Essentially, Said portrays Napoleon, who was himself a scholar, as a puppet of other scholars, following them blindly. Now, I want to discuss this in a separate video, not here, of how an author imagination of something, especially history, let's say, really cannot be proven empirically, and also what Isaac Berlin discusses in his works. Now, moving forward, we encounter the ideas of Volney. We know he was one of the first modern writers to question the historical existence of Jesus, and was also noted for writing somewhat against Muslim-occupied Egypt. Said argues in his book that there are three key factors related to Volney that largely contributed to the Napoleonic expedition. As also mentioned by Napoleon himself, the first was to fight the English, the second against the Ottomans, and lastly against the Muslims. Now, we don't know exactly how much Napoleon believed in Volney's authority on the Orient. What we do know for sure is that Napoleon himself understood the religion of Egypt much more deeply than Volney did. While it's true that Volney viewed Egypt as a scholar, Napoleon approached it as much more a conqueror, a leader. It's well known that many scholars from Al-Azhar supported Napoleon's expedition after he granted them special treatment. They also provided legitimacy to the expedition based on Islamic sources, something Napoleon himself wanted. Napoleon portrayed himself as someone aligned with Muslim ideology, even presenting himself as a follower of Muslim doctrines. He didn't stop there, he also conquered Egypt under the guise of supporting Muslim distinctiveness, emphasizing how much Muslims meant to him. And Said asserts that these kinds of actions could only be carried out by someone who had no prior knowledge or experience of the Orient, relying solely on what books and scholars had told him. Now, these things are true to some extent, especially considering what happened after Napoleon left Egypt, handing it over to his deputy, Gilbert, with instructions to maintain good relations with Islamic leaders for stable rule. But Napoleon himself had a vision of Islam that was quite different and not mentioned by Said in his works. Napoleon himself knew much more about Islam than what we find in Said's writings. There is no clue in Said's work that fully captures this aspect. It's also a bit unclear from reading about Napoleon in Orientalism what he truly thought about Islam. However, we do have some historical accounts of him. For instance, it's said that when Napoleon conquered other European lands, especially when he came to Germany, he met Goethe, the famous German philosopher and poet. It is quite astonishing and somewhat fascinating to learn what Napoleon advised Goethe when they first met. Now, George Henry Lewis offers an intriguing account of this encounter between Napoleon and the famous German poet, when he writes that while discussing many other things and surprised by knowing that Goethe was not a woman but a man, and discussing Voltaire's play Mohammed, when Napoleon learned about Goethe's translation of it, Napoleon criticized the play, calling it not a good piece. He particularly took issue with the way Voltaire portrayed Mohammed, objecting to the unworthy depiction of a figure who had conquered the world. Now, the question that arises from this is why the two Western individuals were even concerned about the portrayal of the Prophet. The situation is far more complex. Napoleon himself, much like Alexander the Great, was a scholar in his own right. Just as Alexander traveled with a team of scholars, Napoleon, an admirer of Alexander, also surrounded himself with intellectuals. He was well versed in various literary traditions, including the writings of Volney and even the Sorrows of Young Werther, which he mentioned during his brief meeting with Goethe. And with this, I will like to conclude this video. The other topics I want to discuss will follow in upcoming videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video, which I will try to post very soon. Thanks for watching.